On the afternoon of 17th July 2014, hundreds of travelers filled the glass-walled departure halls of Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. It was a warm European day. Among the many flights leaving that afternoon was Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17, a long journey from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. Inside the aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, 298 people settled into their seats. There were 193 Dutch citizens, 43 Malaysians, 27 Australians, and passengers from 11 other countries. Some were families going on vacation. Some were students heading home for holidays. Others were business travelers or humanitarian workers. No one imagined that this would be the last flight of their lives. The plane was crewed by 15 professionals, pilots, cabin crew, and engineers, all used to long international routes. They smiled, served coffee, and checked seatbelts as the engines roared to life. At 12:31 p.m., MH17 lifted off gracefully, climbing through light clouds. The journey would take about 11 hours. For the first few hours, everything was peaceful. Passengers watched movies, children played with coloring books, and flight attendants moved quietly down the aisles. But beneath their flight path, the world was on fire. Down below, eastern Ukraine was in turmoil. The war between Ukrainian government forces and pro-Russian separatists was raging across the Donetsk region. Towns were shelled, airfields destroyed, and villages burnt. But airspace above 32,000 feet was still officially open for commercial flights. Many airlines, including Malaysia Airlines, continued to use it because it was the shortest route between Europe and Asia. At 1:19 p.m., MH17 entered Ukrainian airspace. The pilots, Captain Wan Amran Wan Hussein and First Officer Eugene Chu Jin Leong, spoke briefly with air traffic control in Dnipro, reporting altitude and position. Everything appeared normal. Then the controller handed them over to the next sector, Rostov-on-Don, across the Russian border. That handoff would never happen. In the fields below, a group of fighters manned a Buk surface-to-air missile launcher. This Russian-made weapon could shoot down aircraft flying at more than 30,000 feet. Investigators later proved that the system had been brought in from across the Russian border just a day earlier. The crew operating it were not well trained. They were nervous, unsure, and under pressure. On their radar, they saw a single aircraft flying high. They believed it might be a Ukrainian military plane, perhaps an AN-26 transport aircraft that had been dropping supplies. They didn't check twice. Within minutes, they locked on the target and pressed the trigger. A white trail rose from the ground, a missile speeding through the thin air, climbing fast. In the cockpit of MH17, the pilots had no warning. The missile's warhead exploded near the nose of the plane, releasing hundreds of metal fragments that sliced through the fuselage. The cockpit shattered instantly. The front of the aircraft broke apart. The cabin depressurized in milliseconds. What happened next was chaos in silence. The Boeing, now without control, began to disintegrate at 33,000 feet. Bodies, luggage, and fragments of the aircraft fell across miles of farmland. Villagers in Hrabov, a small rural community in Donetsk, looked up and saw fire falling from the sky. The sound came seconds later, a dull thunder that rolled across the fields. Within minutes, black smoke rose from the wreckage. Pieces of fuselage smoldered among sunflower plants. A child's toy, a boarding pass, a passport, all scattered like confetti. There were no survivors. All 298 people on board died instantly. When news of the disaster broke, the world was stunned. Television channels flashed the headline, "Malaysia Airlines plane crashes over Ukraine." People couldn't believe it. Another Malaysia Airlines jet lost, only months after the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. At first, officials said it might be an accident, but soon pictures appeared of the missile trail and of wreckage full of shrapnel holes. Investigators from the Netherlands, Malaysia, Australia, and Ukraine joined forces to find the truth. The crash site lay in the middle of a war zone, guarded by armed rebels. For days, the bodies lay in open fields. International teams were not allowed full access. When they finally reached the site, they found horror. Scattered remains, torn metal, and personal belongings burned beyond recognition. Flight recorders, the black boxes, were recovered and sent to experts. The data proved the plane was destroyed in the air, not by mechanical failure, but by an external blast. Over the next months, investigators pieced together fragments of missile parts found among the wreckage. The serial numbers matched a book system from Russia's 53rd Anti-Aircraft Brigade. Families of the victims demanded justice. In the Netherlands, entire towns went into mourning. Rows of empty chairs in classrooms, pictures of smiling children, now gone. The pain was unbearable. In Malaysia, people lit candles and prayed. In Australia, leaders called it murder. By 2022, Dutch courts found 3 men, Igor Girkin, Sergei Dubinsky, and Leonid Karchenko, guilty of shooting down the aircraft. All 3 were linked to the separatist forces. They were sentenced to life imprisonment in absentia. But the real operators of the missile system, and those who supplied it, were never punished. Years later, in 2025, the International Civil Aviation Organization confirmed that Russia had violated international law. Yet, even after official reports and global outrage, no country truly accepted full responsibility. For the families, justice remained incomplete. Today, if you stand in the sunflower fields near Hrabove, you can still find pieces of twisted metal buried in the soil. Local people call the site the Field of Silence. They still remember the burning wreck and the bodies carried away by trucks. Flight MH17 became more than just a tragedy. It became a turning point for global aviation safety. After the incident, airlines around the world began changing flight paths to avoid any region with conflict. Even if it meant longer routes and higher costs, safety came first. For the people who lost loved ones, the grief never ended. Every year, on the 17th of July, they gather to remember. Photographs are placed on memorial walls, and the names of all 298 victims are read aloud, one by one. Children who lost parents now stand as adults, holding flowers and tears. The story of MH17 is not just about a missile and a plane. It is about how political conflicts, fought by soldiers and politicians, destroy the lives of ordinary people who have nothing to do with war. It is about how a mistake, a wrong decision by one hand on a button, can take away hundreds of futures in seconds. Whenever a new war breaks out, aviation authorities remember MH17. They close airspace early, reroute flights, and alert pilots. Because they know, the sky may look peaceful, but it can turn deadly without warning. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17 will always remain a reminder that every life lost in the sky is a reason to keep the air below safe. The 298 passengers never came home, but their story continues to protect millions who fly every day.